Hey friends, tonight's story fires up in the heart of blistering heat, soot-caked walls, and a life built one hammer blow at a time, the world of the medieval blacksmith. You've seen the slow-mo movie shots, sparks flying, arms flexing, steel glowing. But real life in the forge? Not a training montage, more like a survival mission. The job was sweaty, filthy, backbreaking, and it hurt. A lot. Before we dive in, hit that like button and subscribe only if this kind of slow burn historical storytelling lights your fire. Drop a comment telling me where you're watching from and what time it is. It's amazing to see our little story circle grow across the world. Okay, lights low, fan humming, let's slip back in time. You were born not into royalty, but into iron. No silk sheets, no fancy crests. Just a cradle that smells faintly of burned iron and a future paved in blisters. The family forge was your inheritance, along with soot stains that seemed embedded in your skin since birth. By the time you stopped falling face first into things, you were drafted. 6 years old and you're already an apprentice, which is just medieval code for unpaid laborer with 0 breaks and a face permanently smudged with charcoal. Your toy box? A pile of tongs. Your playground? A furnace that smells like burned eyebrows. While other kids played tag and giggled in the fields, your daily game was guess if this metal is hot with your hand. You win by not losing fingers. Your father? A mountain with a beard. Stronger than an ox, louder than a drum, and his communication style consists of low grunts and the eternal command, hit it harder. His hands could crush walnuts, his stare could silence a night, and his knowledge of metallurgy was matched only by his hatred of taxes. He taught you to read iron like a story, to feed the fire like it's hungry, and to keep your mouth shut when the nobility looked down on your work. Talking back? Not recommended. That's how you catch a horseshoe to the chest and a week of awkward silence. Holidays? Not a thing. The forge is your calendar. If someone's sword broke or a cart lost a wheel, guess who's working at sunrise? You. Always you. Time off? That's just a brief pause between fixing a plow and sharpening someone's axe. You're not just learning a skill, you're learning heat tolerance, sleep deprivation, and how to nap while standing. At 10, you're already seasoned. You smell like firewood, swear like a tavern regular, and carry more weight in your arms than most adults. Even the dog bailed from all the banging years ago. This is the family trade. No room for weakness. If you thought childhood meant carefree days, nope. Around here, it's more of a rumor than a phase. As soon as you can carry something heavier than your own foot, you're in. Full time. No takebacks. Forget toys or fun. Your world is smoke, sparks, and steel. Your jungle gym? A rack of heavy iron tools. Your floor? Dirt soaked in sweat and stray embers. One wrong move and you're getting a first-hand lesson in burn duration. Your fancy title might be apprentice, but what it really means is, do everything, get no credit, and still get yelled at. Stoke the fire. Pump the bellows. Clean up after dad's tantrum. Res-tack coal. And if a horseshoe falls from the loft, try not to die. Before you've even had a chance to steal a bite of bread, your morning wage is already in. A crusty loaf, a few stern nods, and if fortune smiles upon you, a grunt of approval. In blacksmith speak, that's the closest thing to nice job, kid, you're getting today. Outside, the village boys you grew up with are off chasing chickens or getting into goat milking competitions. You catch glimpses of them sometimes, mud-streaked, loud, blissfully unburnt. They reek of dairy and dung, sure, but they'll probably grow into farmers or herders, with days spent beneath skies instead of smoke. You envy them. Because while they learn to shepherd sheep, you're learning to make nails. Yes, nails. Hundreds of them. Bent, warped, reheated, hammered again. Over and over until they're passable enough to keep some noble's henhouse from falling apart. If you're lucky, your father lets you take the hammer yourself, after reminding you in agonizing detail of everything you've done wrong so far. And don't dare mutter "I'm tired." That phrase doesn't survive in a smithy. Tired is for the weak. Burnout? That's for candles. You swing. You sweat. You smile. Or at least you pretend to, so no one sees you blinking back tears. Because to the man glaring over your shoulder, your father, your master, you're not a boy anymore. You're an apprentice. And this apprenticeship never ends. The forge isn't your job. It's your habitat. It stains your skin, sculpts your arms, engraves itself into your bones. By the time you hit 13, it doesn't feel like a place, it feels like a beast. A belching, scorching, hissing beast you must appease with labor, respect, and a healthy dose of fear. You learn the sounds by instinct. The bellows wheezing like an old man. The hiss of metal kissing water. The clang of hammer on iron, ringing like thunder in a canyon. It becomes music, violent, unrelenting music. And your body, calloused and conditioned, moves in rhythm, even in your dreams. Eventually, the heat isn't something you notice. Not because it's easier, but because you've accepted it like you accept gravity. You know which stones will scald, which embers flare too quick, which floorboard will claim your toes if you forget your boots. Your tunic, smoke-dyed and stiff with grease, stinks of fire and fatigue. Your apron? Less clothing, more armor. You don't own much. But the forge? That's yours. Not on parchment, of course. Officially, it's your father's. But in truth, it owns you. You forget what quiet sounds like. When the flames die and the hammer's still, the silence feels wrong, like a skipped heartbeat in a song you've known since birth. Friends? If any remain, they've stopped asking where you are. Probably at the forge has become your permanent status. You are no longer a blacksmith's apprentice. You are the forge. A walking extension of coal and clang. And somehow, you begin to love it. Not the burns. Not the calluses. But the moment when it works. When a nail fits. A blade gleams. A crooked rod bends exactly how you imagined. For a brief flicker, you're not just a soot-covered teen, you're a maker. A builder. A vital cog in the spinning wheel of medieval life. Then, as fast as it came, the feeling vanishes. A new commission lands on the table. The fire snaps back to life. And you swing once more. By the time your peers are just figuring out their limbs, yours are battle-worn. While they sprint and stretch, you creak and stoop. Your arms are strong, but not in a hero holding a sword way. More like someone who's lost a brawl to a sack of anvils. Your back? Crooked. Your knees? Unreliable. This is the price of fire. And it's one you'll keep paying, one glowing nail at a time. Your shoulders now make their own soundtrack. Every lift of the hammer is accompanied by a satisfying pop, like old leather boots in winter. And that happens every few seconds. You've learned to ignore it. Let's talk about your hands. Once you had fingers. Now, iron-tipped talons. The skin is split, hardened, and forever marked by a dance with fire. Soot runs so deep under your skin, not even a baptism in the Nile could rinse it clean. Cuts are routine. Burns? A daily occurrence. Your fingernails are a graveyard, half black, the other half gone. When someone offers you bread, you hold it like it's a baby bird made of glass. Because your knuckles feel like they've been hexed by a vengeful priest. And forget recovery. Pull a muscle? Keep swinging. Twist your wrist? Good thing you have two. Iron doesn't wait for a tea break. It demands respect, and your elbows' complaints are irrelevant. Sleep? A cruel joke. You'd think a day of hammering and hauling would knock you out cold, but no. Your muscles throb so bad you can't even lie still. Your ears ring like a cursed bell tower. And your arms twitch all night long, like you're still mid-swing, fighting imaginary foes in your dreams. You hurt in ways that don't even make anatomical sense. You don't smell tired, you smell scorched. Even your pain has developed its own sub-pain. And your father? He sees this and says one thing, good. You're learning. And strangely, you are. You're not enduring the pain, you're becoming it. Like the iron you shape, your body and soul are forged through heat, pressure, and repetition. You're not growing despite the hardship, you're growing because of it. But by the time you hit adulthood, your body has already survived 2 lifetimes, and limped halfway through both. And here's the kicker, this is only the beginning. In most professions, smoke is a nuisance. In yours, it's a colleague. A terrible one. The forge isn't just hot, it's a furnace masquerading as a room. Every breath is spiced with the flavor of regret, powdered ash, scorched metal, and misery. If you can see more than 6 feet ahead, it means the fire went out. There's no chimney, just a roof hole that somehow pulls smoke inward. Windows? That's a luxury item. What you have are blackened walls, a chorus of coughing, and the occasional breeze that just swirls the poison into your eyes for fun. And your lungs? Let's just say they've signed a toxic lifetime contract with smoke. At first it burns. Then it irritates. Then one day, it just is. Coughing becomes your metronome. Black mucus? A daily update from your internal forge. You reach a stage where clean air feels wrong. Your voice shifts too, now a gravelly growl, like a goat who gargled nails. Every word is scratchy, every breath shallow, and your throat always feels like it's hosting a sandstorm. Still you work. Because you must. And it's not just smoke. It's the metal dust, the oil fumes, the charred leather, the burned wood, and the random mystery item that fell into the fire and released something evil into the air. You've probably inhaled enough different toxins by lunchtime to qualify as a walking alchemical experiment. Protective gear? Sure. A rag tied around your face, if you can still call that protection. It soaks with sweat, traps the heat, and somehow smells worse than the fire itself. But when you take it off, you realize breathing is even worse without it. So you pick your poison, choking on sweat or coughing up fire. And the long-term risks? Oh, they're in the fine print: asthma, black lung, premature death. But you're not thinking years ahead. You're thinking about that gate hinge you're fixing, and whether your father's going to spot the slight bend in it. Because in the forge, air isn't for living. It's just what you trade for the right to keep swinging. By now, you've built a deeply personal relationship with your tools, one founded mostly on suffering, grim necessity, and a kind of shared, daily betrayal. Your hammer? It's not just a tool anymore. It's practically a phantom limb. You've given it a name, screamed at it, begged it for mercy. You've swung it so many times that your shoulder now pops like a cursed music box every time you raise it. But without that hunk of iron in your grip, you're just a sweaty, soot-streaked figure in a smoky shed. That hammer doesn't just shape metal, it shapes you. It also opens your skin with regular precision. Then there's your tongs, those treacherous pincers that never grasp what you want them to. They're hot, heavy, and somehow always manage to clamp down on your own fingers at exactly the wrong moment. You've burned your hands more than you've successfully lifted anything. When the iron slips and your grip falters, you curse, your father barks, hold it like you mean it, and for a split second, you consider flinging them into the fire just to watch them suffer like you have. The chisel? A shadow of its former self. Once sharp, now a weary edge dulled by endless abuse, used not only to carve and shave but also to pry open jammed doors and fix things that shouldn't even be your problem. Files, punches, rivet sets, mysterious pokers whose names you've long forgotten. Your workbench resembles something between a craftsman's station and a medieval interrogation chamber. And in a way it is. You've been stabbed, bashed, pinched, shredded, and skewered by nearly every item you call essential. Your fingers twitch when introduced to a new one, as if they know what's coming. Then there's your apron. Meant to protect, and it does, sort of. If protect means catching hot flecks of steel and pressing them gently into your chest like a lover who doesn't know their own strength. It's more scorch than stitch. In winter the leather stiffens like a corpse. Yet despite it all, you care for these instruments like their kin. You oil them. Sharpen them. Line them up in solemn silence each night, because if one breaks, so does your livelihood. No tool, no work. No work, no food. So yes, these tools are your life. But make no mistake, they are also your tormentors. Every nail driven, every horseshoe forged, is another quiet battle between flesh and iron. Your tools whisper each day, "We'll help you survive, but we'll take little pieces of you along the way." And you nod, like a man who's heard it all before. "Fine," you mutter. "Now hand me the hammer." You don't wear a crown, wield a sword, or march with armies. But without you, this village wouldn't last a week. You're the blacksmith. The indispensable fixer of every shattered, snapped, or stuck thing this town throws at you. You're the medieval version of tech support, emergency repairs, and customer complaints, all rolled into one ash-caked figure who smells like fire and frustration. A knight cracks his blade? You remake it. A plow breaks midfield? You patch it. A monk's bell splits, a baker's oven warps, a shepherd's latch jams. Guess who they come running to? That's right. You. Every time. And they always act like you've just been standing there waiting, tongs in hand, for them to grace you with another urgent disaster. They arrive unannounced, usually covered in mud and self-importance. "I know you're busy," they begin, "but could you just—" That phrase. Could you just? The words that haunt your waking hours. And the kicker? You almost never get thanked. They assume this is your destiny. That you were born to repair their collapsing lives with your calloused hands and bleeding palms. When the door swings, the bell rings, or the bucket holds water again, they nod and disappear as if they'd done you a favor. As if forging a replacement hinge at sunset, for a piece of stale bread and a grunt of recognition, is an honor. Payment, when it comes, is a roulette of currencies. Sometimes coin. Sometimes a bundle of onions. Sometimes vague promises that vanish by next market day. One man gave you a chicken so dead it was halfway to fossilized. Said it'd make good soup. It didn't. And still, they come. With problems that aren't yours, requests that aren't fair, and faces that expect miracles. And you? You sigh, roll up your sleeves, and grab your hammer. Because at the end of the day, the forge doesn't ask questions. It just waits for you to return. And you always do. A bent gate hinge from someone sitting too hard, you're on it. A dagger snapped during a tavern brawl, your problem now. A bizarre, twisted hunk of iron no one can identify but insists is very important. Also you. Every time it's you. And yet, when the village gathers to cheer someone, it's always the knight, the priest, or the miller with that plump smug-faced goat. You. You're the background hum. A necessary function. Not quite a person, more like a reliable extension of the anvil. But here's the truth only you truly grasp. None of them would last a week without your work. Their carts would stall. Their gates would splinter. Their horses would hobble. They don't sing songs about blacksmiths. but their entire lives are quietly held together by your hands. You might think peace is good news. No raiders. No shrieking nobles demanding swords at sunset. But for a blacksmith, peace is a disaster. Because while you do make hinges and plows, it's war that fills your coin pouch. When the land erupts into chaos, you're suddenly the most important person in town. Weapons. Armor. Arrows by the barrel. Even horseshoes burn out faster under cavalry charges. The forge roars, the gold flows, and you're too tired to drink, but at least you're not broke. And then, it stops. The Lord waves a flag. Peace returns. The knights ride home, and your orders vanish like smoke in the wind. No more swords. No more helmets. Just a farmer asking if you can sharpen a sickle and accept 3 onions in return. You pivot. Household goods. Cauldrons. Spits. Handles. But there's no money in it. Everyone wants miracles and offers goat boy wages. You find yourself bargaining like a merchant, pleading like a pauper, selling your hammer's song like it's dried fish in a crowded market. Try to raise your prices and they look at you like you've hexed their livestock. But you're just hitting metal, they scoff. As if the iron shapes itself with a prayer and a hymn. You start to miss the chaos. Not the blood, not the fear. Just the rhythm. The demand. The importance. When knights lined up outside your workshop, shields dented, purses jingling, you mattered. Now you're fixing keys for doors no one locks. Repairing pots that should be buried. Restoring tools that ought to be artifacts. Peace brings rest to everyone else. To you, it brings hunger, stress, and the slow erosion of worth. And though you'd never admit it aloud, sometimes a voice inside whispers, a tiny skirmish wouldn't hurt. Just a minor border dispute. Some jobs end. You finish, clean up, celebrate, rest. Blacksmithing isn't one of those. You patch a hinge, and the wagon's wheel breaks. You fill an order of nails, and they come back needing double. And by the way, they'll pay you after the harvest, maybe. You wake before the sun. You sleep well after it disappears. And even then, your mind won't stop hammering. You dream in sparks. You sleep with the ringing of anvils in your ears. You even remember who still owes you 6 eggs and a proper thank you. Even the quick fixes are illusions. Someone arrives with a rake twisted like a drunken snake. Just a little repair, they say. That's 2 hours of fire, hammer, and forced small talk as they hover asking, is it done yet? And when you finally get a second, just one moment to drink something that isn't smoky steam, your apprentice charges in. The friar's horse through a shoe. And guess who's fixing it? Of course you do, because you're the blacksmith. And around here, that title means you're not just important, you're indispensable. You're the last call when everything else breaks down. The forge doesn't care about your plans. It never rests. The fire constantly hungers. Leave it unattended and it dies. Ignore your tools, and they rust, warp, betray you. The anvil shifts in the summer heat like it's trying to escape. The bellows crack with winter's bite. Everything in your workshop is either crumbling or plotting to. Even Sundays, the so-called day of rest, laugh at you. Maybe you get one morning off, unless someone's ox cart splinters on the road to market. Then you're up again, wiping sleep from your eyes with your apron, praying the priest doesn't catch you working while the church bells ring. You don't keep a to-do list. What would be the point? It would never end. Blacksmithing isn't a job. It's a ritual. Hammer, fix, repeat, until either your tools break or you do. And the strangest part? You kind of love it. You might think that shaping molten metal all day would at least buy you 2 basic rewards, a decent meal and uninterrupted sleep. But in the blacksmith's world, those are rare privileges, not promises. Clean water is a treat. Polite customers? Fantasy. Let's talk about food. You spend every hour of daylight burning energy like a racing horse. And what do you get for it? Dry bread so rough it could file metal. Cold pottage that tastes like regret and turnips from 2 days ago. On a good day, which today isn't, you might get a sliver of pork so salted it makes your teeth itch. You eat standing up, one hand on a spoon, the other guarding your bowl from stray sparks. Conversations during meals are limited to grunts and curses. And if someone bangs on the door mid-chew because their latch jammed, say goodbye to that stew, it's going cold. You don't eat for pleasure. You eat to keep your body swinging the hammer. Fuel and iron out. Now let's talk about sleep, or whatever mockery of it you're allowed. When you finally collapse into bed, your hands are buzzing, your back feels like a cart ran over it, and your ears are still echoing with the day's chorus of metal on metal. Your bed? A sack of straw with the comfort of a rock pile. Your blanket is a charred wool sheet that smells faintly like ash, ale, and distant sorrow. Just when your eyes begin to close, your mind jolts back to life. That hinge you didn't finish, that strange rattle in a cartwheel, that client who still hasn't paid you in 3 weeks. Sleep becomes a math problem. You lie there counting how many hours you might have before someone wakes you because a noble sword needs urgent sharpening, at midnight, because obviously you don't need sleep. You learn to survive on crumbs and cracked dreams. Bites taken on the run. Half naps with one ear open. Everything is driven by stubbornness, not rest. In your world, productivity outranks hunger. Deadlines outrun drowsiness. Food and sleep aren't earned, they're stolen between hammer strikes. You'll eat when there's a lull, sleep when the flames allow, and pray the coals don't die before you doze off. Once, long ago, your hands were soft, maybe when you were a child. That memory's a blur now. Today, your fingers are tools. Stiff, bloated, covered in so many layers of scar and callus that they barely feel the world anymore, except when the pain stabs through. Writing with a quill? Forget it. Lacing boots? A challenge. But grabbing searing hot tongs? You do it with the casual ease of someone who's forgotten what fear feels like. Pain? That's just background noise now. Every joint cracks when you move. Your knuckles look like they've been mugged. Your palms? A road map of blisters and burns. And still, you keep swinging. Old wounds and new ones layer your body like bark on an ancient tree. Want to know what season it is? Count the blisters. If you're at 5 or more, it's summer. You've lost fingernails more than once. Some peeled off neatly, others came off screaming. One time, you crushed your thumb so badly it turned the color of a dying plum for 2 weeks. Did you stop? Of course not. You just swapped hands and grunted more often. Cuts are a daily affair. Sometimes it's the slip of a sharp edge. Other times, a file nips back. And every now and then, it's the iron itself that bites. Something always draws blood. You wrap it in whatever cloth you can find, spit a quiet curse, and keep swinging. But the burns are worse. Some are light, a quick sizzle, a warning. Others bubble and hiss like angry soup, leaving behind warped maps of pain carved into your skin. At this point, you've branded yourself more times than you'd care to admit. You don't even flinch anymore. You just acknowledge the pain like an old drinking buddy. Your grip strength, however? Legendary. You could crush walnuts for sport. But finesse? Long gone. You drop tools. Your fingers twitch in the cold. At 30, your hands look and feel like those of a battle-worn knight who's lost a dozen wars and now plays dice for stew in a smoky tavern. Yet somehow, despite everything, these hands keep you alive. They forge the blades, mend the latches, and grip the hammer that protects your name. They ache, sure, but they do the job. Because in this life, It doesn't matter how broken you feel, as long as you can still lift the iron. Let's be real, you don't exactly smell like roses. Honestly, you haven't smelled clean since age 5. The moment you became your father's apprentice, your body adopted a permanent scent: ashtray, burnt bacon, and desperation, layered beautifully. Welcome to the blacksmith's world. You could scrub until your skin shines like a polished sword, but it wouldn't matter. The stink of the forge becomes part of you. The smoke seeps deep into your clothes, your hair, your pores. Your sweat? Not even sweat anymore. It smells like a campfire someone poured ale on. You could bathe, in theory. But the water is cold, the time is scarce, and you're already filthy before sunrise 6 days a week. What's the point? You'd be coated in grime again before the first rooster crows. Your clothes are beyond help. You wear the same scorched tunic and charred leather apron every day. They haven't been truly clean since the last village feast, and even then, someone spilled a pint of ale on you before midday. Now they just cling to you like a second skin of stubborn grime. Tried perfume once. Didn't stand a chance. The forge devoured it within minutes. Flowers lean away from you. Bread hardens when you pass. Cats hiss like you owe them money. And worst of all, people notice. You walk into the tavern and it's like parting the Red Sea. The innkeeper doesn't even ask, he steers you to a corner table by the window. Not out of kindness, but out of olfactory self-defense. No one wants to sit next to a man who smells like a collapsed chimney. Still, you take it in stride. A little shame is better than being invisible. At least they know who you are. They say that's the blacksmith, with a mix of admiration and a slight wince from the smell. You're not the most charming soul in the village, but you are the most noticeable. You smell like smoke, metal, and sweat-soaked leather marinated in grit and quiet defeat. But that's not a stench, it's a signature. It says you work hard. It says you make things. And that scorched, bitter scent that lingers long after you've passed? That's the scent of a professional. You didn't exactly pick this life. The forge picked you. It passed from your father's blistered hands into your own, like a rusted crown. Now you're doing the same, handing down soot and legacy. Your son doesn't play with wooden swords or tumble through fields. He carries coal, pumps the bellows, and holds tongs steady while sparks bite at his sleeves. You tell him, don't flinch. He's maybe 7. Already smells like burnt wool and wet rope. There's guilt, yes, but only a little. You're not punishing him. You're preparing him. This is how it works. This is how families survive. He watches you work, watches the hammer rise and fall, eyes wide with a mixture of awe and dread. You recognize that look. You once wore it yourself, watching your father, who seemed carved from the same rock he stood on. Now you know the truth. He wasn't stone. He was just tired, just responsible. You teach the boy the little things first. How to judge heat by color. How to tap, not pound. How to hear the metal, not just hit it. Sometimes you shout, not from anger, but from repetition. Hold it right. Too cold. Don't cry. It's just a burn. When you can, you soften. A bedtime story by the dying coals. A rare bite of dried fruit if the coins stretch far enough. But softness doesn't last long in the forge. There's too much to do. The fire doesn't care about feelings. Soon, his hands will look like yours. His back will ache before he hits puberty. He'll learn to sleep through ringing ears and wake with the dawn without being called. He'll grow out of his tunic, but not out of the scars. And when your knees fail, when your breath shortens, when you can no longer lift the hammer, he will. Some might say it's unfair, that the cycle should break. But this is how it's always been. A chain of steel, smoke, and sweat passed from one weathered grip to the next. You're not just teaching a trade. You're forging a legacy. A fire that never dies. So yes, you raise your son to do it all again. Not out of cruelty, but because someone must tend the flame. You've spent your life with the fire too close, the hammer too heavy, and the air too thick to breathe properly. It was never a matter of if your body would give out. Just when. And now it's happening. Your knees creak like floorboards in a storm. Your spine refuses to unfurl. The fingers that once twisted iron now tremble when they lift a spoon. The forge still bellows, but your arms don't answer the call. The hammer feels heavier each morning, as though it senses the end. There's no dramatic finale. No epic songs sung by grateful villagers. You don't collapse in firelight, you just slow down. Start handing off tasks. Sit more. Watch more. He asks the questions now, and you fumble for the answers you once knew by heart. The villagers still nod when they see you. But they turn to your son when they need something fixed. He's the one with the raw hands now. The burns are his. The weight has shifted. And in the quiet, where the fire crackles and your hands rest, you feel something unexpected. Pride. You were never rich. But you left behind something that lasts. You never held a deed, never owned a library, never draped yourself in fine linen, but you were essential. You kept blades keen, wagons rolling, doors swinging, and the plows cutting through earth. The world rarely stopped to thank you, but it moved because of you. Chances are, you won't see 50. Few blacksmiths do. The toll accumulates. Lungs charred by decades of smoke, joints ground smooth by repetition, a heart worn thin by heat and effort. But your work remains. In the iron nails gripping church doors. In the swords resting at noble sides. In horses, iron-shod and ready for war or harvest. You won't leave behind medals or titles, only tools, burns, and a son who swings your hammer. And in your world, that is legacy enough. They'll place you in a humble grave. No gold leaf, no carved stone. Just a weathered wooden marker and a forge that remembers your name. And every time a hammer rings through the village long after you're gone, that echo is you, still laboring, still alive in steel. You weren't a knight. You didn't gallop into glory beneath a crest, nor did you shine in the sunlight like a polished shield. But you forged that shield. You didn't till the fields, but you shaped the plow. You didn't knead the bread, but you built the oven that baked it. You didn't raise the castle, but every hinge on its gates, every rivet in its beams, was born of your fire. You were a blacksmith. And in the medieval world, that meant everything. While kings crowned and nobles quarreled, you stood at the forge. Day in, day out. Shaping civilization piece by molten piece. 1,000 simple things, buckles, pins, nails, rings, not flashy, not praised. But the hidden strength behind every structure. Your life was thunderous. But your legacy? Quiet. No songs were sung for your hammer. No epics chanted about your bellows. But every wheel that turns, every sword that doesn't snap, every barn door that stays upright in the wind, that's your song. Your work. Villagers walked past your shop, saw smoke curling into the sky, caught the scent of fire and sweat, and assumed that was all. But inside was a symphony: heat, steel, rhythm, resolve. You didn't just shape iron. You shaped the very structure of life. One horseshoe. One blade. One nail at a time. And now, though your hands rest, the fire burns on. Your son grips your hammer. Your grandson learns the weight of the tongs. Your name may blur with time, but your creations do not. Pass from palm to palm, forged things outlast men. You were never crowned. Never toasted. Never carved into legend. But without you, nothing functioned. No wagons moved. No battles were won. No doors held fast. You were the scaffolding beneath the stories, the ember beneath every triumph. And that truth, rarely spoken aloud, matters more than monuments. Because in a world crafted from timber, stone, and sheer human stubbornness, you were the fire, the quiet spark that turned raw ore into legacy. You weren't just part of the world. You kept it turning. Long before alchemy conjured images of cloaked Europeans in candlelit chambers, it meant something deeper, something older. Its origin wasn't in Latin scribes or bubbling flasks. It lived in the glowing sands of ancient Egypt. Back then, transformation wasn't chemistry, it was divine. The Egyptians had a name for it, Chamia, born from chem, meaning black. It wasn't just the color of soil. It was the essence of potential. The dark silt left behind by the generous Nile wasn't just fertile, it was sacred. To them, black wasn't death. It was possibility, richness, matter waiting to be reborn. And so, Egypt itself became more than a place. It became a symbol of transformation, of nature's quiet promise that even the darkest material could yield light, food, life. Just like your forge. Just like your hands. This is where the word alchemy, alchemia, was first born. But in ancient Egypt, alchemy wasn't simply about turning lead into gold. That glittering obsession came much later. To the Egyptians, alchemy wasn't confined to a lab or a metal. It was a living, breathing force. It pulsed in the sacred rituals of mummification, where the body was not just preserved, but transformed, reborn, ready for eternity. It shimmered in the temples, where priests crafted divine elixirs from oils, herbs, and minerals. It whispered through the stars, took root in the soil, and crackled in the hearths where bread was baked and beer was brewed. Transformation, they believed, was not a trick, it was the divine language of the cosmos. Egyptian alchemy wasn't just physical. At its heart, it was spiritual. To change something on the outside, one had to first understand it from within. This sacred principle echoed across continents and centuries, etched into alchemical scrolls from every civilization that followed. Some stories tell of divine guidance, of a deity who walked between the stars and the Nile, offering secrets to those ready to listen. That figure was Thoth, the ibis-headed god of the moon, of knowledge, of magic. It was said Thoth gifted humanity with the blueprints of reality, transformation, life after death, the sacred architecture of existence itself. These teachings, legend claims, were recorded on a mystical artifact, the Emerald Tablet. But before we explore that mystery, one truth must be clear. Alchemy did not begin as a greedy chase for gold. It began as a sacred science of the soul. In ancient Egypt, alchemy was the primal flame, the fire from which all others were lit. Every later school of thought, from the sands of Persia to the streets of Paris, could trace its lineage back to this golden cradle of civilization. If Egypt was the birthplace of alchemy, then Thoth was its divine midwife. In myth, Thoth wasn't merely a god, he was the god of everything that mattered: time, magic, language, equilibrium, and the laws that governed all creation. His form was crowned with the moon, his face the curved beak of the ibis. He was the celestial archivist of all things hidden and sacred. Where there was alchemy, there was Thoth. The Egyptians believed he had written thousands of texts filled with divine understanding, scrolls not meant for human eyes. But one fragment survived. And it would alter history forever. The Emerald Tablet. Its name still stirs imaginations. Said to be inscribed on glowing green crystal or emerald, the tablet carried only a few poetic lines. Barely a paragraph. But those lines were thought to contain the master key, the formula to change not only matter, but soul, and even reality itself. It begins with a single phrase, one that has echoed across centuries, across tongues, across traditions. As above, so below. As below, so above. This was not just metaphor. It was a law. The principle of correspondence. A truth whispered from temple walls and passed from sage to sage. The idea that the small and the vast are mirrors. That the pattern of the stars repeats in the grain of sand. That the soul reflects the universe. And through that mirror, the alchemist sought to understand everything. What shifts in the stars echoes in the chambers of the soul. What transforms in the crucible stirs the unseen realms above. The emerald tablet wasn't a recipe for riches, it was a vision. A declaration that nothing is fixed. Everything can change. Be refined. Be uplifted. Be made new. It wasn't just about turning lead into gold. It was about turning ignorance into clarity. Turning chaos into cosmos. Turning flesh into spirit. The tablet spoke of a single force, an origin of all things, that rises from the earth and descends from the heavens, carrying within it the power to shape all existence. Some named it the philosopher's stone. Others called it the soul, the breath of the divine, the thread of consciousness itself. But the real mystery wasn't the stone, it was the mind that could perceive it. Understanding the tablet required more than intellect. It required longing, vision, a seeker's heart. This sacred riddle, said to be whispered by Thoth himself, outlived dynasties. As Egypt's golden age dimmed, the fire of alchemy flickered across the borders, carried like a holy ember through time. It traveled east, across deserts and mountains, into the ancient land of Persia. And there, it was reborn. Alchemy wasn't simply passed on, it was transformed. In Persia, it drank from new wells of meaning. It mingled with Zoroastrian thought, one of the oldest monotheistic philosophies, rooted in the eternal struggle between light and shadow, truth and illusion. Fire was central, sacred, radiant, untouchable. Not merely a symbol, but a living presence, kept in temples as a reflection of divine wisdom. This holy flame became the soul of the furnace, the light by which Persian alchemists sought transformation. But the spark that gave alchemy its voice came from a mystic standing between worlds. Zosimos of Panopolis, born in Roman Egypt in the 3rd or 4th century, was more than a thinker. He was a visionary. His works combined technical craft, descriptions of stills, vessels, and elixirs, with deeply symbolic dreams. In his most haunting vision, Zosimos saw himself dismantled, burned, and reborn in a furnace. But this wasn't a nightmare. It was a revelation. A death not of flesh, but of ego. A divine trial where the soul was stripped, tested, and sanctified. To him, alchemy wasn't just about metals. It was about metamorphosis. The alchemists, like the lead they worked, had to be broken, melted, and purified to become gold, not just in the hand, but in the heart. Zosimos believed that true alchemy was spiritual, that the fire which transformed matter also refined the spirit. His words lit a path far ahead of his time, describing a sacred union of substance and soul. His writings are riddled with symbols: lions devouring serpents, men dissolving into vibrant clouds, divine figures born from flame. These were no mere chemical diagrams. They were poetic metaphors, depictions of the inner pilgrimage toward perfection. To read Zosimos is not to read science. It is to walk the labyrinth of the soul. Zosimos was among the first to insist that real wisdom couldn't be bought, memorized, or handed out like coin. It had to be earned, through effort, pain, and revelation. To walk the alchemist's path was to accept a life of fire and trial, not just in the forge, but in the soul. His ideas rippled through time, crossing deserts and dynasties. Though many of his writings were lost in flame or misunderstood by later readers, one truth stood tall: alchemy had evolved. No longer a crude experiment in turning metals to gold, it had become something greater, a sacred philosophy. As the glow of ancient knowledge dimmed over the ruins of Egypt, Greece, and Persia, a new light ignited in the east. A golden age of intellect arose beneath the crescent banner of Islam. From the 8th to the 13th century, while much of Europe slipped into shadow, cities like Baghdad, Cairo, and Cordoba burned bright with ideas. They became havens of learning, crucibles where astronomy, philosophy, mathematics, and yes, alchemy, were refined. At the heart of this renaissance stood a singular figure. A name that would transcend time, Jabir ibn Hayyan, known to the West as Geber. He wasn't just a chemist. He wasn't just a philosopher. He was the synthesis of both, an alchemist who built the bridge between mysticism and method. Often called the father of chemistry, Jabir's contributions were nothing short of revolutionary. Working under the Abbasid Caliphate in the 8th century, he treated alchemy not as esoteric magic, but as an experimental science, something observable, repeatable, and testable. He developed laboratory techniques still used today: distillation, crystallization, sublimation. He designed new instruments, refined powerful acids, and penned over 100 treatises blending metaphysics with meticulous experimentation. Yet Jabir never cast aside the spiritual essence of the craft. In his view, everything in creation, earth, air, fire, water, was infused with inner qualities, echoes of a divine design. His alchemical worldview wasn't only chemical, it was symbolic, numerical, astrological. Every transformation in matter mirrored a deeper transformation within the soul. He also introduced a radical idea for his time: balance, or mizan, as the key to alchemical success. Just as the body needed balance to thrive, so did metals. Gold, to Jabir, wasn't just precious, it was perfection made tangible. The most stable, balanced form of matter. And with enough care, he believed, even the humblest metal could be raised to that state of harmony. Jabir's influence couldn't be contained by borders. His writings, eventually translated into Latin, infiltrated the libraries of medieval Europe. And though many Western alchemists didn't know it, they were standing on the shoulders of a Persian visionary. A man whose ink became the blueprint for the modern scientific method. Through Jabir ibn Hayyan, alchemy shed its chrysalis. It was no longer merely symbolic, it had become a system, a structure, a science. But at its heart, it remained what it had always been, a guidebook to transformation, both physical and divine. While the Islamic world preserved and advanced the ancient truths, Europe clung to superstition and dogma. But knowledge, especially the kind that glows with universal truth, has a way of moving. Quietly. Persistently. Through scrolls and scholars, through ink and conquest, alchemy slipped westward. Not with a bang, but with a whisper too powerful to silence. The great bridge between East and West wasn't made of stone or wood. It was built in cities like Alexandria, where once the great library blazed with knowledge, and later in Toledo and Cordoba in Islamic Spain, the heart of Al-Andalus. In these places, something rare and fragile bloomed: collaboration. Christian, Jewish, and Muslim scholars worked shoulder to shoulder, translating ancient manuscripts from Arabic into Latin, breathing forgotten fire back into the world. They toiled over the writings of Jabir, Zosimos, and Aristotle, and through their ink-stained fingers, the old ideas came alive again. By the 12th century, Europe was starved for wisdom. The rediscovery of these ancient texts wasn't an academic revival, it was a cultural explosion. But what arrived wasn't cold chemistry. It was alchemy in its most enchanted form, a fusion of spirit, matter, and meaning. Monasteries began tucking strange scrolls behind scripture. Monks, normally sworn to silence and devotion, lit hidden flames, melting metals not just to purify but to purify themselves. In secret chambers beneath cathedrals, European minds became captivated by a single, burning idea. Transmutation. The belief that base metals could become gold, and that the human soul could follow the same path. Among the most powerful texts to reach Europe was the Tuba Philosophorum, or Assembly of the Philosophers, a dialogue of ancient voices unraveling the secrets of nature. Then came the Picatrix, a towering grimoire of Arabic origin, overflowing with astrological and alchemical imagery. These weren't mere manuals, they were maps to meaning, worldviews stitched in symbols, and they planted seeds in restless minds. Translated into Latin, these texts traveled underground, often disguised as religious commentaries to avoid the flames of heresy. Because alchemy threatened more than scientific dogma. It dared to ask, if lead could become gold, could a peasant become noble? Could man touch the divine? The church grew wary, but curiosity proved stronger than fear. Alchemy offered a secret path to transformation, one unbound by dogma, hierarchy, or crown. By the late Middle Ages, Europe had taken up the torch. The fire that once roared in Egypt, Persia, and Baghdad now smoldered in monastic scriptoriums, castle towers, and clandestine circles. Alchemy had crossed the threshold, and now, it was about to evolve again. In this new age, alchemy was no longer just scholarly, it became sacred. It was a quest wrapped in shadow and flame, and at the heart of that quest pulsed a single obsession: the Philosopher's Stone. No longer just a legend, the stone became alchemy's holy grail. It was said to have the power to turn any base metal into gold, and grant eternal life through the elixir of immortality. But it was never merely physical, it was veiled in allegory, hidden in riddles, whispered in code. In dusty manuscripts, it bore many names: lapis philosophorum, the red stone, the powder of projection. Some claimed it was a glowing red crystal. Others knew it was a symbol of inner awakening, of purified consciousness, of the soul reborn. But all who chased it agreed, the stone was the key to ultimate transformation. True alchemists believed the universe was not a dead machine, but a living organism, one that ached and pulsed toward perfection. And so did they. Metals, too, were believed to live, slowly maturing within the earth's dark womb. Lead was seen not as useless, but as gold's younger sibling, still evolving. Just as nature moved toward harmony, so too could humankind. And at the center of this mystical progression stood the Philosopher's Stone, an accelerant for transformation. European seekers like Albertus Magnus, Roger Bacon, and later Paracelsus dedicated their lives to understanding nature's hidden processes, hoping to unlock its ultimate truth. They built furnaces and observatories, studied the stars, gathered rare stones and powders, and wrote elaborate, cryptic texts. These were filled with imagery: serpents, suns, dragons, and kings, all metaphors for the alchemist's journey, both physical and spiritual. The making of the stone followed a legendary path known as the magnum opus, or the great work. It began with nigredo, the blackening, symbolizing decay, the death of the ego, the necessary unraveling of the self. Then came albedo, the whitening, a phase of purification and clarity. Next was citronides, the yellowing, illumination, awakening. And finally, rubedo, the reddening, rebirth and the arrival of the stone. But why bury such knowledge in allegory and symbols? Because true transformation, the alchemists believed, was not for the unready. The stone revealed itself only to those prepared not just in intellect, but in spirit. To seek the stone was to seek spiritual perfection. While many chased gold, the wisest alchemists knew the true treasure was the perfected soul. As alchemy rooted itself deeper in medieval Europe, it began to vanish from the public eye. What was once shared openly in temples and academic circles faded into whispers. The reasons were many: religious suspicion, political danger, and the alchemical texts themselves, which had grown into puzzles only the initiated could decode. The Church, in its towering power, viewed alchemy with both curiosity and caution. Some Christian mystics embraced it, likening the transformation of metals to Christ's resurrection. Others condemned it. The idea that man might alter nature, or achieve divine understanding without God's sanction, bordered on heresy. To survive, alchemists cloaked their teachings. Allegory became armor. Symbolism became sanctuary. Thus began the era of hidden practice, of codes, symbols, and secret societies. Among them were the Rosicrucians, a mysterious order that appeared in the 17th century claiming to safeguard ancient wisdom passed down from Egypt and Arabia. Their manifestos spoke of spiritual enlightenment, cosmic harmony, and concealed sciences. Whether real or myth, their ideas sparked waves of interest and generations of seekers. Then came the Freemasons, whose legacy began with stoneworkers but whose rituals echoed alchemical principles: purification, transformation, the search for inner light. Whether or not they practiced alchemy in the literal sense, their ceremonies aligned with its deepest goal, the forging of the perfect self. Alchemy also found sanctuary in books of riddles and revelations. One of the most striking was the Mutus Liber, a book that spoke not a single word, only images. Silent sequences that told the story of transformation without uttering a line. Others used the green language, a poetic tongue of puns and metaphors meant to hide the truth from outsiders while illuminating it for the wise. The alchemist became a figure of duality. Outwardly, he might be a monk, a scholar, a physician. Humble. Silent. Inwardly, he was a revolutionary, chasing the divine in metal and flame, in breath and prayer, in every spark of creation. In the end, it was the secrecy meant to destroy alchemy that, paradoxically, preserved it. Hidden in symbols, buried in manuscripts, whispered through generations, the sacred fire never went out. Like a coal hidden beneath cold ash, alchemy smoldered quietly through the centuries, passed hand to hand, from master to apprentice, like a whispered secret carried by firelight. In these quiet corners, it kept evolving, not just as a primitive science, but as a breathing philosophy. A way of seeing the world that soon met its greatest test, the birth of modern chemistry. By the 1600s and 1700s, a quiet revolution stirred. It didn't roar with armies, it murmured in manuscripts. This was the dawn of the Enlightenment. A new age of reason and skepticism was rising. The poetry and symbols that once cloaked alchemical wisdom were no longer welcome in learned circles. In their place came a new vocabulary: observation, experimentation, proof. Out of the ashes of the occult rose chemistry, alchemy's logical child. But this wasn't a violent overthrow. It was a slow, deliberate metamorphosis. Many of the early chemists were once alchemists themselves. They simply turned their gaze from soul to substance. The sacred transmutation of spirit became the quantifiable reaction of elements. No more dragons, no more mystic suns, just glass beakers, scales, and meticulous records. One of the final turning points came through Robert Boyle. In 1661, he published The Skeptical Chymist, a bold manifesto. In it, Boyle declared that matter was composed of particles, what we now call atoms, and that the mysteries of transformation could be explained not with riddles, but with laws of nature. He didn't mock alchemy. He refined it. He believed transformation was real, but that it belonged to physics, not parable. Shortly after, Antoine Lavoisier unveiled the true role of oxygen in combustion and shattered the old doctrine of four elements: earth, air, fire, and water. Science marched forward. The periodic table followed. Laboratories became the new temples of understanding. Alchemy, with its secret codes and poetic metaphors, was pushed to the shadows. Scholars dismissed it as superstition, an embarrassment best forgotten. But here's the irony. Chemistry was born from alchemy's flame. The tools. the techniques, the insatiable curiosity. They all came from the same furnace. Alchemy had walked so chemistry could run. Still, the world was shifting fast. Industry demanded precision, not mystery. Governments funded science, not secrecy. The philosopher's stone was replaced by the microscope. The crucible, by the Bunsen burner. What had once been sacred now served steel, steam, and profit. Yet not all was lost. In hushed studies and dreaming minds, alchemy still flickered, not as a science, but as a symbol. A living metaphor for transformation, unity, and the unbroken dialogue between matter and spirit. While the world turned to chemistry for facts, some still turned to alchemy for truth. Because some flames don't vanish. They just go underground. Alchemy may have vanished from the official textbooks, but it never truly died. It did what it always promised, it transformed. What was first whispered in tombs beneath the Egyptian sand, then refined in the sacred fire of Persia, then hidden in the candlelit scripts of medieval Europe, it didn't disappear. It evolved. It splintered into chemistry, psychology, medicine, and mysticism. Its robes were burned, but its message survived. By the 20th century, a new kind of alchemist emerged. Not with a crucible and flame, but with a notebook full of wonder. They didn't seek gold, but meaning. They searched not for eternal life, but for understanding. Because in the end, the alchemical journey was never about metal. It was always about transformation. Carl Jung, the Swiss psychologist, breathed new life into ancient alchemy by seeing what others had missed. To Jung, the old masters weren't merely obsessed with transforming metals. They were, without knowing it, charting the map of the human soul. The dark phase, nigredo, mirrored depression, the collapse of certainty. The whitening, albedo, was insight, the light beginning to return. The reddening, rubedo, marked the birth of a fully integrated self. The legendary philosopher's stone, Jung claimed, wasn't some magic crystal. It was individuation, the deep, personal journey of becoming whole. Alchemy, it turned out, was never just about gold. Today, its echoes are everywhere. In self-help books promising transformation. In stories where heroes descend into chaos only to rise reborn. Even our everyday language, words like refine, distill, purify, all trace their roots to the alchemist's furnace. In science, too, the alchemist's spirit lingers. Chemists split atoms. Physicists probe dark matter and hunt for unified field theories with the same wide-eyed awe ancient adepts reserved for ether and quintessence. The quest for the universe's blueprint continues. Only the terms have changed. Yet perhaps alchemy's true legacy lies not in procedures, but in its worldview. It never separated soul from substance, mystery from measurement. It insisted that to transform the outer world, one must begin within. Every experiment, every trial, posed a sacred question: who are you becoming in the process? In our age of velocity, algorithms, and relentless precision, alchemy offers a whisper, a timeless reminder: to change anything truly, you must also be willing to change yourself. And so the alchemist's fire still burns. Not in alembics and crucibles, but in hearts. Waiting. Calling. Transforming. Because alchemy was never just a science. It was a mirror. At first glance, Cappadocia seems almost otherworldly, a land of twisted stone towers and wind-sculpted cliffs, as if nature herself were experimenting with sculpture. Tourists stand in awe, snapping photos of the surreal skyline. But few realize that the true marvel lies not above, but below. Beneath this strange and beautiful terrain, a hidden world sprawls for miles. A labyrinth of underground cities, forgotten by time. These aren't crude caves or temporary shelters. They are vast, complex settlements, carved into the rock with startling precision, complete with homes, chapels, storerooms, stables, and even classrooms. Some plunge as deep as 18 levels, housing thousands beneath the soil. And what's even more astonishing, many of these ancient cities remained unknown to the modern world until just decades ago. In 1963, a man renovating his home in the town of Derinquia knocked down a basement wall, and didn't find stone or soil. He found a passageway. One corridor led to another, which led to a staircase, which led to a chamber. He had unknowingly opened a doorway into one of the largest underground cities ever discovered. It was as if a whole civilization had chosen to vanish beneath the earth, leaving only silence behind. But Derinquia was only the beginning. Over time, researchers uncovered hundreds of subterranean communities scattered throughout Cappadocia. At least 40 major cities, all interconnected by a web of tunnels and secret exits. These were not random burrows. They were carefully designed, strategically engineered. Massive stone wheels, acting as doors, could be rolled into place from within to seal off sections. Ventilation shafts ensured a steady supply of fresh air. Deep wells tapped hidden aquifers, allowing people to survive for months, even under siege. Why would anyone go to such lengths? What would compel people to build entire cities beneath the surface? That question continues to intrigue historians. And the answers, still buried beneath layers of time, may be more complex than we can imagine. Were these places hidden outposts from invading armies? Monastic retreats tucked beneath the soil? Secret sanctuaries for ancient spiritual orders? Or were they something even older, something far stranger? Whatever the truth, one thing remains certain: Cappadocia was never just a region. It was a refuge. A parallel world carved into stone. A sanctuary beneath the sky where entire communities vanished into the earth and thrived. The deeper you journey into these sunless cities, the more surreal the story becomes. To understand why ancient people chiseled homes beneath the hills of Cappadocia, you first have to understand the land itself. Because Cappadocia is not ordinary ground. Millions of years ago, volcanoes roared across what is now central Turkey, flooding the earth with ash. That ash eventually solidified into a pale, porous rock called tuff, soft enough to carve with a chisel, strong enough to stand for centuries. Rain and wind worked their own kind of artistry, sculpting the landscape into bizarre towers, fairy chimneys, stone cones, and surreal spires. The entire region looks less like something from Earth and more like a forgotten planet from myth. But ancient people didn't just marvel at the stone. They embraced it. They shaped it. They made it their own. Early settlers realized this rock could be hollowed with simple tools. No wood, no bricks, just stone giving way to vision. They carved houses, storage cellars, and worship halls. And unlike the vulnerable homes above ground, these underground spaces kept cool in blistering summers and warm through brutal winters. Above the surface, they built churches into cliffs. But it was below that the real miracles unfolded. What started as simple hideouts, caves for food storage, storm shelters, and cool sleeping quarters, evolved into vast subterranean cities. As time passed, threats grew. Kingdoms fell. Armies marched. And so the digging deepened. Caves became rooms. Rooms became networks. Networks became cities. Tunnels connected kitchens to homes, stables to wells, prayer chambers to sleeping quarters. They carved air shafts that breathed through 10 stories of stone. They dug staircases wide enough for people and livestock, yet narrow enough to guard. This wasn't chaos, it was strategy. It was survival. And the most astonishing part? These places are ancient. While many were expanded during the Byzantine era, some of the oldest levels, in sites like Derinquia and Kaymakli, may trace back to the Hittite Empire or even earlier, around 2000 BC. This land called for transformation. And the people of Cappadocia answered, not with machines or steel, but with endurance, imagination, and stone-carving willpower. The ground itself became their ally. A ceiling turned into a shield. A floor became a fortress. The sky inverted, filled not with stars, but secrets. But who or what were they hiding from? That's the mystery that unfolds next. Beneath the sleepy town of Derinquia lies something extraordinary. Not a basement. Not a cellar. But an entire city. A city buried in silence. A city no one even knew existed, until a man, remodeling his home in 1963, knocked down a wall and discovered a tunnel, dark, narrow, endless. That tunnel led to chambers. The chambers to corridors. The corridors to spiral staircases winding downward, deeper and deeper into the unknown. Room after room. Level after level. Until explorers realized they weren't in a small shelter. They were standing inside a forgotten metropolis, 18 stories below the earth. They had uncovered Derinquia, the deepest underground city ever discovered in Cappadocia, perhaps in the entire world. And what archaeologists found down there? It was nothing short of astonishing. This wasn't just a place to hide. Derinquia wasn't an emergency shelter carved in haste. It was a fully functioning underground city, hewn from soft volcanic rock with astonishing care and ambition. Entire lives unfolded here, beneath the surface. Homes with carved niches for beds, kitchens with stone hearths, churches with arched ceilings, wine and oil presses, storage chambers, schools, and even a sacred space for baptisms. At its peak, Derinquia could shelter as many as 20,000 people, along with their animals, food stores, tools, and faith. It wasn't a bunker. It was a civilization under stone. Its engineering was nothing short of genius. Giant circular stone doors, resembling millstones, were built to slide silently into place, sealing tunnels during times of danger. These weren't crude blocks. They were precision-crafted, movable only from within and almost impossible to dislodge from without. Fresh air was drawn into the city through a web of ventilation shafts that reached from the surface to the lowest levels. Wells, tapping into subterranean aquifers, provided water deep underground, removing any need to return to the exposed world above. There was even a mission school within its depths, complete with study rooms, proving this was more than a place to wait out a siege. This was a society determined not only to survive, but to continue, to grow, to teach, to worship. But Derinquia is wrapped in a mystery that refuses to unravel. No clear records remain. No carvings on the walls to declare its builders. No names, no dates. Some believe the early Christians expanded it to escape Roman or Arab persecution. Others argue the foundations are far more ancient, perhaps laid by the Phrygians, or even the Hittites, over 2,000 years before Christ. Why, exactly, would anyone go to such lengths to live underground? Was it truly war that drove them downward? Or was the threat something more elusive, something deeper, perhaps not even human? The city remains silent on the matter. Derinquia holds no clear answers. Just stone, shadow, and questions. Even now, much of the complex remains uncharted. And the deeper you descend, the less it feels like a city, and the more it begins to feel like a myth made solid. Building upward is hard. But building down, through layers of rock, without sunlight, without modern tools, without open space, that's something entirely different. And yet they didn't just dig. They designed. These cities weren't frantic rabbit warrens. They were masterworks. Layered systems of purpose and logic. Like an onion, each level had its function. The upper floors housed living quarters, closer to the exit in case the danger passed quickly. Below were kitchens, food stores, workshops, and animal stalls, placed deliberately to manage smoke, smell, and fire risk. The deeper the chamber, the more essential its purpose during a prolonged siege. And then, there was the ventilation system, brilliant in both simplicity and scale. Long shafts were carved vertically through the stone, some plunging over 50 meters deep. No fans, no motors, just gravity and geometry. And yet, air flowed freely to every chamber, reaching even the lowest levels with ease. Water, too, was ingeniously managed. Many cities were built directly atop natural aquifers, and wells were accessed from within, ensuring water security even under siege. In some places, the upper portions of these shafts were sealed off completely, protecting the supply from contamination or enemy sabotage. This was survival through mastery. And perhaps more than that, this was memory, chiseled into stone. There were passageways, narrow, winding veins carved through the stone. Some led to smaller chambers tucked deep in silence, others stretched further, connecting entire cities hidden beneath the earth. In times of peril, these tunnels became arteries of survival, moving people and messages beneath the surface of the world itself. And the defenses? Ingenious in their simplicity. Corridors so tight that intruders had to approach one by one. Trapdoors that dropped without warning. Secret exits winding out into ravines or riverbeds, invisible from above. And most famously, the stone doors. Massive, round slabs crafted to roll silently into place, sealing off corridors within seconds. From the outside, they looked like part of the rock. From within, they were shields of last resort. Every tunnel, every wall, every turn had a purpose. These weren't shelters for a passing storm. They were sanctuaries for long-term life under extreme threat. And that begs the question, what kind of danger demands this level of preparation? And more chillingly, did it ever go away? For centuries, historians and explorers alike have asked the same haunting question. Who are the people of Cappadocia hiding from? What force could push entire populations underground, not for days, not for shelter, but to live? The most accepted theory points to invaders. Central Anatolia was a crossroads of empire and conquest. The Assyrians, the Persians, the Romans, the Byzantines, waves upon waves of armies passing through, claiming, burning, conquering. Later, during the rise of early Islam, Arab raids drove many Christian communities into hiding. Cities like Derinquia and Kaymakli may have become sanctuaries, allowing entire villages to vanish beneath the soil, waiting for danger to pass like a storm overhead. But there's a problem with that idea. These cities were not carved in haste. They weren't desperate last-minute digs. Their depth, complexity, and architectural sophistication point to something else: long-term vision, generations of labor, planning, engineering, purpose. Some of the deepest chambers even predate Christianity itself. So who dug the first layers? Some scholars trace them back to the Hittite Empire, nearly 4,000 years ago. Others argue it was the Phrygians who expanded the early tunnel networks. But beyond that, the evidence vanishes. No names carved into stone. No symbols etched into the walls. No clear record of who first disappeared underground, or what drove them there. That's where theory becomes legend. Some believe these ancient cities weren't built to hide from people at all, but from nature itself. Massive earthquakes, solar storms, ancient warfare that turned the sky black and poisoned the soil. Others go deeper still. They whisper of older fears, beings not of this earth. Tales of sky gods, watchers, destroyers. Beings found in the myths of every culture. Theories that say these cities weren't built to withstand armies. They were built to vanish from something that hunts. And when you look closely, it's hard not to wonder. The hidden air vents. The escape tunnels. The seamless stone doors. It doesn't feel like they were hiding from conquest. It feels like they were trying to disappear completely. As if what they feared wasn't a passing threat, it was a predator. These ideas, of course, are speculative. But they point to a deeper truth. No matter how far we dig into Cappadocia, the most important question remains unanswered. Who were they hiding from? And did it work? Because sometimes, the deeper you dig, the darker it gets. Imagine living not just a day, but months, years even, in silence, in darkness, beneath the earth, beneath history itself, and knowing that whatever you were hiding from might still be above, waiting. No sun, no open skies, just cold stone walls, the dim glow of oil lamps, and the soft, constant hum of life below ground. This was reality for thousands who sought safety beneath the surface of Cappadocia during times of upheaval. But what was it really like to live in these vast underground cities? Despite the shadows, these spaces pulsed with life. Carefully organized, designed not just to survive, but to endure. Families lived in interconnected chambers carved from the rock. Kitchens were cleverly placed on lower levels to control smoke, and food was baked in clay ovens. The smell of fresh bread likely mingled with the earthy scent of damp stone and the musk of livestock. There were churches and chapels here, too, quiet sanctuaries etched with crosses, some adorned with fading frescoes. These people didn't merely wait out danger. They prayed, held rituals, worshipped. There were common halls for meetings, simple schools for children, and long corridors that echoed with voices, footfalls, and daily rhythm. Light came from oil lamps, dozens of them, flickering through the tunnels. Their smoke was drawn away by dual-purpose ventilation shafts, which also kept fresh air circulating. But life underground was no paradise. The air could be thin, the darkness unrelenting, and the silence, when it came, could feel like the whole earth had stopped breathing. Water came from deep wells cut into ancient aquifers. Grain was stored in sealed rooms to prevent rot. Presses carved directly into the rock revealed the making of wine and olive oil, hinting at a life that still embraced flavor, tradition, and ritual. These cities were not panicked constructions. They were permanent, deliberate, and planned for endurance. Animals, goats, sheep, chickens, were housed in designated areas, often near the surface. This made them easier to manage and allowed their warmth to rise through the city. They weren't just food, they were part of the ecosystem. The builders of these cities understood more than engineering. They understood people. Private quarters offered dignity and space for families, while shared areas built community. Life underground wasn't merely survival. It was about preserving a way of life, sustaining identity, culture, and connection. It's humbling to imagine. While war and chaos ravaged the world above, entire societies quietly continued below, hidden, but not lost. People married here. They raised children. They mourned their dead. They passed stories across generations, all under ceilings of carved stone and lamplight. To live underground wasn't to live in fear. It was to live deliberately. Cappadocia's underground cities weren't isolated bunkers. They were part of something far more intricate. Beneath the valleys and hills of this ancient volcanic plateau runs a labyrinth of tunnels, chambers, and concealed passageways. It's believed that cities like Derinquiu, Kamakli, Ozkanak, and others may have once been connected, not just by intention, but by stone. Some of these tunnels extend for kilometers, threading beneath the landscape like roots beneath forest soil. Narrow and winding, barely wider than a man's shoulders, they were likely used to slip past danger, deliver messages, transport goods, or even move entire families in secret between settlements. What they built wasn't just hidden. It was integrated. And the deeper we explore, the more we begin to see, this wasn't a scattered collection of hiding places. It may have been an entire civilization beneath our feet. Derinquia and Kamakli, two of the largest known underground cities, are believed to be connected by a tunnel nearly 9 kilometers long. If true, it's not just an astonishing feat of ancient engineering, it's evidence of advanced coordination, planning, and vision across multiple settlements. It suggests something extraordinary. These weren't isolated hideouts. They were part of a connected network, an underground alliance that could function like a hidden federation during siege or crisis, each city ready to support the other through stone-lined arteries beneath the earth. But these tunnels weren't only practical. They were tactical. Constructed with tight choke points, sudden blind turns, and narrow bottlenecks, the tunnels were designed to slow down and trap anyone who dared to invade. Pursuers would be forced to move in single file, vulnerable and exposed. Some passages were even armed with trapdoors or sealed with massive stone plugs that could roll silently into place, turning escape routes into walls in seconds. Yet even today, we don't know the full extent of these networks. New shafts and hidden corridors continue to emerge from the ground like whispers of a deeper past. In 2014, a stunning discovery was made beneath the town of Nevsur, an even larger subterranean complex that could rival or surpass Derinkuyu in both size and depth. Archaeologists believe this newly revealed site may hold dozens of levels, complete with aqueducts, sanctuaries, communal spaces, and countless yet unmapped tunnels. So what were these passageways truly for? Were they simply escape routes? Or were they part of a sophisticated society built to function, perhaps even thrive, without ever touching the sky? With each discovery, one thing becomes more clear: Cappadocia's underground is not just a collection of homes and halls, it's an engineered world. A living system, quietly designed, intricately connected, and intentionally hidden beneath the feet of history. And perhaps we've only scratched the surface. Could there still be entire cities, buried not by erosion or time, but by choice? Because here, in the valleys and volcanic slopes of Cappadocia, the earth doesn't just hide stories. It guards them. Even after decades of excavation, Cappadocia's underground remains wrapped in riddles. The stones may be silent, but the questions echo louder than ever. Questions not just about how these cities were built, but why. And when hard data runs dry, myths and alternative theories flood in to fill the void. One of the most debated mysteries is the age of these cities. Traditional archaeology links much of their expansion to the Byzantine era, when Christian communities fled invasions and retreated underground. But some researchers believe the oldest layers are far more ancient, possibly as much as 4,000 years old. If so, what could have driven entire civilizations below ground so long ago? That's where speculation ignites. Some suggest these cities were carved in preparation for natural disasters, monumental floods, solar storms, volcanic winters. The careful design, the self-sustaining structure, the airtight doors, they could all point to survival bunkers, crafted for environmental collapse. According to ancient astronaut theorists, early people may have descended underground to hide from something far more terrifying than nature. They believe the myths of sky gods and celestial destroyers refer to beings that came not from Earth, but from above it. Rulers not of mortal kingdoms, but of stars. And suddenly, the idea of cities built to vanish doesn't seem so far-fetched. Whether the threat came from armies, weather, or something far stranger, one truth remains. These cities weren't meant to be found easily. And maybe, just maybe, there's more waiting in the dark, not lost to time, but hidden by intention. Because when you build a world beneath the earth, you're not just escaping danger. You're rewriting the story of survival itself. To modern ears, these stories might sound like metaphors, echoes blurred by centuries of retelling. But perhaps they point to something far more chilling. Something real enough, powerful enough, to drive entire societies underground. Some scholars turn to myth for meaning. In many ancient beliefs, descending into the earth is more than a tactic, it's a transformation. A symbolic death. A rebirth. Could these cities have been spiritual sanctuaries? Places not of hiding, but of ritual metamorphosis? Or maybe they were never abandoned, only buried, deliberately, and forgotten by design. The truth resists certainty. No single explanation accounts for it all. The vastness, the craftsmanship, the sheer age. These cities don't slot neatly into any historical mold. And maybe that's the most haunting part. Because sometimes, what we uncover isn't just the past, it's the edge of something beyond comprehension. Today, visitors come to Cappadocia for the dreamlike vistas. They drift over sun-scorched valleys in hot air balloons, gaze at fairy chimneys bathed in orange twilight, and marvel at the otherworldly beauty. But beneath their feet, the ground is hollow. Below the surface lies a forgotten world sculpted in darkness, a world that still holds its breath after thousands of years. The underground cities are now open to tourists. People file down narrow stairways, squeeze through low stone tunnels, and step into silent chambers where families once waited for danger to pass. But only fragments have been unearthed. Many rooms remain sealed. Some tunnels collapse into nothing. Some doorways seem to lead nowhere, at least, nowhere we're meant to follow. These are more than ruins. They are monuments to human resilience. Evidence carved in stone that people will do whatever it takes to protect what matters: their children, their faith, their very way of life. In vanishing from the surface, they left behind no words, but a message all the same. A message not written in language, but in rock. We may not know their names. We may never hear their stories. But we know this: they were thinkers, engineers, visionaries. They built a world meant to last in silence. A world that might never have been meant to be found. Cappadocia reminds us that history doesn't always live in daylight. Sometimes the deepest truths are buried deliberately. Hidden from invaders. Hidden from the curious. Hidden, perhaps, from time itself. And what remains? Mystery. Mystery in the perfect symmetry of the stone doors. In the ancient ventilation shafts that still breathe. In miles of tunnel, untouched, still cloaked in shadow. Maybe the true purpose of Cappadocia's underworld was never meant to be understood. Maybe it was built for a future that would forget it. But when you walk those silent halls, when the rock above presses down and the quiet wraps around you, you feel something stir. Not fear. Something older. Endurance. Because when the world above fell into chaos, the people of Cappadocia didn't run. They went deeper. They chose to survive in the dark, together. And the earth? It has kept their secret well. To the ancients, sleep was not escape. It was a threshold. A door to something deeper. Dreams weren't dismissed as noise. They were sacred. Messages, warnings, visions. Whispers from gods and spirits. And sometimes, reminders that even in darkness, something eternal waits. For the ancients, the line separating the physical from the spiritual was never sharp. It was more like a veil, thin and shifting. And in sleep, that veil grew thinner still. To dream was not a passive act. It was sacred, mysterious, and often laced with awe or dread. In those silent, defenseless hours of night, it was believed that the divine could reach through that veil and touch the human mind. What was whispered, or thundered, in those moments could ripple through a kingdom, alter a ritual, or reshape a city's destiny. Across ancient cultures, from the fertile floodplains of Mesopotamia to the towering temples of Egypt, and the sacred hills of Greece, dreams were not mere imagination. They were visitations. They were messages. And they had consequences. Dreams could foretell wars. They could unmask betrayal. They could grant healing, or demand blood. To ignore a potent dream wasn't just foolish. It was perilous. Because the dreamer, in those ancient eyes, was more than a sleeper. They were a vessel, briefly open to higher truths, cosmic secrets, and divine instructions. And sometimes, that dreamer became something greater, a prophet. Whole professions were dedicated to decoding the symbols born in the night. Priests, oracles, shamans, seers, they studied dreams the way others studied stars or scrolls. A serpent in a dream might signal transformation, or doom. A rising sun might foretell triumph, or deception, depending on its context. Each culture had its own dream lexicon, but the belief was shared across the ancient world: dreams mattered. Even now, fragments of that ancient reverence survive in our language. We speak of following our dreams, or say I woke up to a realization, echoes of older meanings. But in the ancient world, dreams weren't metaphors. They were maps. They were warnings. They were sacred intelligence delivered while the conscious mind lay still. This was before Freud. Before REM cycles. Before sleep was measured by machines and stripped of myth. Because to the ancients, dreams weren't shadows of thought. They were places. Real places. And to walk through them was to walk among gods. The first known civilization to leave written records of dreams were the Sumerians, inhabitants of ancient Mesopotamia more than 5,000 years ago. To them, dreams weren't random flickers of thought. They were transmissions, complex, symbolic, and weighty with meaning. Among the remnants of their once great cities, archaeologists unearthed clay tablets etched with the dreamscapes of kings and commoners alike. Some were personal. Others were political. Dream interpretation wasn't superstition. It was a discipline, taught, practiced, respected. Sumerian rulers kept court dream interpreters, men whose duty was to decipher these nighttime messages from the gods. Their interpretations didn't just offer insight. They could sway royal decisions, influence warfare, or determine the survival of entire cities. One of the clearest glimpses into this ancient dream world lies within the Epic of Gilgamesh, one of the oldest surviving literary works in human history. In its verses, both Gilgamesh and his companion Enkidu experience powerful, symbolic dreams. On the eve of their perilous quest to slay the monster Humbaba, Gilgamesh dreams of battles in the heavens, of crumbling mountains and cosmic upheaval. These visions were not dismissed. His mother and the temple priests pored over their meaning, interpreting them as divine omens, cryptic warnings laced with prophecy. The dreams guided their path. Not as fantasy, but as sacred truth. Because in that ancient world, to sleep was not to escape reality. It was to enter a different one. A world of gods, symbols, and hidden knowledge waiting just beyond the veil. The Sumerians believed that dreams came in two forms. Some were divine, messages sent by gods to instruct, warn, or guide. Others were empty echoes, fragments stirred up from the day's thoughts and routines. Telling the difference wasn't simple. It required the insight of a trained interpreter, a priest or dream diviner who could decode symbols, omens, and hidden meanings buried within the tapestry of sleep. In some temples, special chambers were reserved for sacred dreaming. Priests, and sometimes kings, would lie down in ritual spaces, hoping to receive visions from beyond. This practice, which would later be called dream incubation in other cultures, may have begun with the Sumerians themselves. These dreams weren't seen as private musings, they were oracles. Sacred. And often, they carried more weight than signs witnessed in the waking world. Dreams could even be tools of power. A ruler who claimed divine visions strengthened his rule, validated wars, or cemented decisions. The gods spoke to me in a dream wasn't just a belief, it was a political weapon. For the Sumerians, the cosmos wasn't cold or silent. It was alive with intention. And dreams were the language of that living universe. Every image, a lion, a storm, a falling star, carried meaning. To dream was to listen. To ignore those dreams was to defy the heavens themselves. To the ancient Egyptians, dreams weren't mere messages, they were gateways. Portals to the divine. Pathways through the veil, allowing glimpses of gods, glimpses of death, glimpses of eternity. In a culture obsessed with the afterlife, sleep was more than rest, it was rehearsal. And dreams were instructions from beyond. Egyptian texts treat dreams with deep reverence. They weren't just private visions, they were sacred revelations. Like the Sumerians, Egyptians divided dreams into two types. There were truth dreams, sent from gods or spirits, to heal, protect, or guide. And there were false dreams, confusing illusions, sometimes caused by physical imbalance or impure spirits. Temples to deities like Thoth and Serapis became sanctuaries of sacred sleep. Worshippers would sleep within temple walls, hoping to receive divine visions. These dreams were often recorded on papyrus or stone, interpreted by priests, and shared as acts of spiritual witness. In some cases, the dream itself was believed to heal the dreamer. One of the most remarkable legacies is the Ramesside Dream Book, written around 1300 BC. This ancient scroll functions as a catalogue of dream symbolism, a kind of spiritual dictionary. It contains over 100 entries, pairing dream imagery with interpretations. For instance, dreaming of eating crocodile meat? That meant the dreamer would soon conquer his enemies. But dreaming of drinking warm beer? A warning of sorrow to come. These weren't idle interpretations. Pharaohs, generals, and high priests all sought dream interpreters as essential advisors, messengers between the mortal and the divine. In Egyptian cosmology, dreams were also connected to the Ka, the spiritual essence or soul. To dream was not only to receive wisdom but to touch the invisible part of oneself, to meet the eternal in the stillness of night. In ancient Egypt, it was believed that during sleep, the Ka, the vital essence of the self, left the body and wandered through unseen realms. What it encountered there returned as dreams. Sometimes it brought back messages from ancestors, long since buried beneath the sands. Other times, it came face to face with gods, bearing cryptic visions or divine instructions. Not all dreams were gentle. Some were seen as attacks, visitations by malevolent spirits. To ward them off, Egyptians whispered protective incantations before sleep, their voices weaving spells meant to keep dark forces at bay. Even in tomb inscriptions, dreams appear. Kings described the gods coming to them in the night, validating their rule or whispering warnings for the future. In the land of pyramids and pantheons, dreams weren't illusions. They were revelations, fleeting glimpses into eternity. In Greece, dreams existed at a crossroads between medicine, myth, and philosophy. They weren't just personal experiences. They were cosmic messages, carried by gods, spirits, even the dead. But unlike earlier civilizations, the Greeks dared to ask why we dream, planting the seeds of psychology in the soil of the sacred. Nowhere was this more evident than in the sanctuaries of Asclepius, the divine healer. At his temples, known as Asclepians, pilgrims from all over the ancient world arrived seeking answers, not from doctors, but from dreams. The ritual was called incubation. Before sleeping, visitors would fast, bathe, offer prayers or sacrifices, all to prepare themselves for divine revelation. And in the darkness of the temple, they would wait. It was said that Asclepius himself would appear in their dreams, diagnosing ailments, prescribing cures, even performing dream surgery. Upon waking, priests known as therapeuti interpreted the visions and administered treatments guided by the gods. It was a sacred fusion of healing and dreaming. And remarkably, it seemed to work. The walls of these temples were inscribed with testimonies from the healed, carved gratitude offered to gods who cured through dreams. But healing was just one side of the dream world. In Greek epics, dreams carried political weight and divine strategy. In the Iliad, Zeus sends a deceptive dream to Agamemnon to alter the course of war. In the Odyssey, Penelope speaks of two gates, one of horn, from which truth emerges, the other of ivory, from which falsehood flows. Dream interpretation became an art form and a science. Thinkers like Aristotle and Heraclitus questioned whether dreams were divine signals, or simply echoes of the soul's stirrings. Meanwhile, Artemidorus of Daldis penned the Oneirocritica, a 5-volume guide to decoding dreams, based on profession, gender, status, and symbol. His interpretations would be studied for centuries. To the Greeks, sleep loosened the soul's grip on the body, allowing it to float in a liminal space, between waking and death, where deeper truths could be glimpsed. Dreams were not idle fantasies. They were glimpses into the divine mind. Across the ancient world, dreams weren't seen as random or irrelevant. They were powerful, often prophetic. In many cultures, it was believed that during sleep, time itself bent, and through dreams, the future could leak into the present. To dream was sometimes to see fate before it arrived. And to carry that vision was to bear both profound power and great responsibility. Across Sumer, Egypt, and Greece, history is filled with tales of rulers, generals, and prophets whose decisions were shaped not by counsels or strategy, but by dreams. One misread vision could doom a kingdom. One accurate interpretation could alter the future. In Mesopotamia, dreams of celestial signs, falling stars, darkened suns, rivers running red, were seen as harbingers of war, famine, or divine judgment. Priests meticulously recorded these dreams, compiling them like cosmic weather reports, searching for patterns that might reveal the fate of empires. These weren't idle records. They were consulted in moments of crisis, when decisions weighed heavily. The Egyptians shared this reverence for dreams as messages from the divine. One of the most famous accounts comes from Pharaoh Thutmose IV, who claimed that the great Sphinx spoke to him in a dream, promising kingship if he cleared away the desert sands covering its body. Whether myth or calculated narrative, the dream helped secure his claim to the throne, a divine endorsement etched in stone. In Greece, dreams weren't just private experiences. They influenced politics, strategy, and philosophy. Leaders sought omens before making major decisions. They practiced dream incubation, sleeping in sacred spaces to receive visions, or turned to oracles like the famed seers of Delphi, whose dreams were part of their divine communion. Even Alexander the Great was said to have dreamed of the Egyptian god Serapis before his campaign in Persia, a dream he interpreted as a sign of destiny. But dream prophecy wasn't reserved for the elite. Ordinary people, too, believed dreams could predict love, childbirth, illness, or death. The Oneirocritica by Artemidorus, a vast collection of dream interpretations, contains thousands of entries. Dreaming of lost teeth? A death in the family? Flying? A dramatic change in fate. These dreams gave the common person access to the sacred, a chance to glimpse the threads of fate. Yet with this access came fear. What if a dream's warning was missed? What if it was misunderstood? In a world where gods whispered through sleep, rest was no longer just peace, it was prophecy. And in that world, healing often came not from herbs or blades, but from dreams. Across ancient cultures, sacred dream temples emerged as centers of healing. These were not hospitals in the modern sense. They were spiritual sanctuaries where the ill sought not just relief, but revelation. Treatment began not with medicine, but with sleep. The most renowned of these were the Asclepians of ancient Greece, named after the god of healing, Asclepius. But the tradition ran deeper. Long before the Greeks, in Egypt and Mesopotamia, people believed that the gods could offer cures through the realm of dreams. These sanctuaries weren't escapes from suffering, they were gateways to divine encounter. The central practice was called incubation. Pilgrims purified themselves through fasting, ritual bathing, or offering sacrifices. Then, under night's quiet watch, they lay down in sacred chambers, opening their bodies and spirits to the possibility of a dream encounter. The goal was clear: to dream with purpose, to receive a message, a cure, a sign. In these dreams, gods or sacred animals might appear. Some saw themselves wrapped in serpents, symbols of healing and transformation. Others were bathed in radiant light or touched by divine hands. Some even reported dreams of spiritual surgery, their ailments removed within visions as vivid as waking life. Upon awakening, temple priests, trained in the sacred art of dream interpretation, would sit with the dreamer, listen closely, and offer guidance. They might recommend prayers, actions, or rituals based on what the dream had revealed. These dreams were more than sleep. They were sacred dialogues, bridges between the human and the divine. And those who entered these temples did not come only to be healed. They came to be transformed. Sometimes healing meant more than herbs or hands. It meant drinking a sacred brew under moonlight, walking a prescribed path in silence, or offering thanks with a carefully chosen sacrifice. And in some cases, the dream itself was the medicine. These were not fringe practices. The dream temples of the ancient world drew thousands. Pilgrims journeyed across seas and deserts, seeking something only the night could offer. Carved into stone walls were testimonies, miraculous recoveries, blindness lifted, fevers broken, aching bodies made whole. Were these healings physical, psychological, or divine? That's a question modern minds still debate. But to the ancients, the answer was simple: belief and dreams had power. And that power could heal. Dream healing was not isolated to Greece. It crossed cultures and continents. In Egypt, seekers turned to the temples of Serapis and Imhotep, lying in wait for nighttime revelations. In Mesopotamia, devotees of Gula, the goddess of medicine, entered sacred spaces to sleep and receive guidance through dreams. What united these practices was a shared understanding: the body and soul were woven together. And the soul, unbound by waking logic, spoke clearest in dreams. To be healed wasn't just to mend flesh. It was to find balance between the human and the divine. In these sanctuaries of silence, dreams weren't just stories. They were medicine. Night became the ritual. The dream became the cure. But dreams weren't only a gateway to healing. In the ancient world, they were also a passage to the dead. Across civilizations, it was believed that dreams thinned the veil between the living and the departed. In that soft space between midnight and dawn, the dead could reach across the silence and speak. To dream of a lost parent or a departed friend was not seen as memory. It was contact, a visitation, a message from beyond. In Egypt, where the afterlife formed the heart of religion, such dreams were seen as sacred events. It was believed the Ka, the soul, traveled freely during sleep, sometimes even into the realm of the dead. If a loved one appeared in a dream, it wasn't idle grief. It meant they had something to say. A warning, a request, a need for remembrance. Sometimes these dreams led to action. Egyptians wrote letters to the dead, placing them in tombs or on altars, asking for guidance, protection, or forgiveness. And they waited, watched, slept, hoping for a reply from the beyond. In Mesopotamia, dreams of the dead were approached with reverence and caution. The dead were powerful still, and their appearance in sleep could signal a disturbance, an unfinished ritual, a neglected offering, a broken vow. After such dreams, the living would purify themselves, make amends, set things right. The Greeks, too, took these encounters seriously. In the Odyssey, Odysseus descends into the underworld, speaking with spirits of the fallen, a mirror of what many believed could occur during deep sleep. Heraclitus, the philosopher, once said, "The waking share a common world, but the sleeping turn inward to their own." And in that inner world, the dead could find their way in. Beyond the Mediterranean, cultures across the world believed the dead were never fully gone, and that dreams were their chosen language. A whispered voice in sleep was not metaphor. It was real. It mattered. To the ancients, sleep wasn't a retreat from the world. It was where the past lived on. Where the lost could ask, one final time, to be remembered. But dreams weren't just messages. They were puzzles. To understand them required more than curiosity. It demanded skill, training, ritual. Interpretation wasn't just guesswork. It was an art, one reserved for the wise, the initiated, the ones who knew how to read the hidden language of the night. Because in the ancient world, dreams weren't fleeting. They were sacred. They were coded. And they were never meaningless. In the ancient worlds of Mesopotamia, Egypt, and Greece, dream interpreters held a role as sacred as any priest or seer. They were not mere guessers of symbols. They were trained experts, custodians of a deeper language. These interpreters studied immense catalogs of dreams, memorized generations of symbol lore, and developed the wisdom to tell the difference between a divine vision and an idle fragment of the mind. Their readings held real weight. Dreams could guide kings, shift the direction of armies, even influence laws and medicine. The stakes were high, because in a world woven with omens, a single symbol misread could mean disaster or deliverance. Across cultures, certain symbols appeared again and again, echoing in the dreamscapes of centuries. But their meanings were rarely literal. A snake might signal danger, transformation, or even healing, depending on the context. Fire could warn of destruction or purification. Flying wasn't simply a fantasy. It might suggest the soul's longing to escape burdens or transcend earthly ties. Egyptian dream books catalogued hundreds of such meanings. To dream of drowning might suggest emotional upheaval ahead. To see oneself blind could imply spiritual awakening, or a painful truth coming into view. These interpretations were not arbitrary. They were part of a complex symbolic language refined over generations, passed from one dream reader to the next. In ancient Greece, the scholar Artemidorus of Daldis compiled the Oneira Critica, a 5-volume manual of dream analysis. He taught that symbols did not mean the same to all people. Context mattered. A flood in a farmer's dream meant something very different than a flood seen by a sailor. Personal experience shaped the meaning of each dream, a startlingly modern concept from the 2nd century. Dream interpretation was closely linked to divination. It was one thread in a much larger tapestry of omens, signs, stars, and rituals. A dreamer might consult an oracle, draw sacred lots, or offer prayers to make sense of a troubling vision. Some kept personal dream journals, written on clay tablets or papyrus scrolls, not only for personal insight, but as records for the community and generations to come. To ancient minds, symbols were not idle fantasies of sleep. They were sacred ciphers. Keys. Messages from the gods, whispered through the veil of dreams. Understanding them meant access to divine will, to fate itself, and to the hidden workings of the soul. To the ancients, a dream was never just a story, it was a message written in the code of the cosmos. Today, we often treat dreams as fleeting shadows, strange images that vanish with the morning light. At best, they're used by therapists or mined by artists. But to those who came before us, dreams were sacred. Structured. A nightly conversation with the divine. They were portals to healing, to guidance, to communion with ancestors or gods. Dreams shaped medicine, influenced religion, and steered empires. They were part of the architecture of life. So, what changed? As science and rationalism rose, particularly in the West after the Enlightenment, dreams were reclassified. What was once a sacred voice became a neurological event. Divine symbols became data points. Dreams were reduced to brain chemistry, firing synapses, emotional residues, bits of memory. The mystical was replaced by the measurable. The sacred became clinical. The symbolic became chemical. Even now, in moments of loss, transition, or sudden intuition, dreams still hold sway. We still turn to them, searching for something that waking life can't always explain. A dream of a loved one, long gone, can offer a kind of closure words never could. A recurring nightmare may mirror stress, guilt, or truths we refuse to face by daylight. Modern psychology, beginning with the work of Freud, and deepened by Jung, tried to reclaim a sliver of that ancient wisdom. They didn't speak of gods, but of archetypes and the unconscious. Still, they understood dreams matter. They carry weight. Even if we've stopped calling it divine, the power remains. The ancients knew something we too often forget, that the dream realm isn't separate from life. It reflects life. It refracts it. It shows us our desires, our wounds, and sometimes something far beyond ourselves. Something timeless. Perhaps it was a god whispering through shadow. Perhaps it was a vision of tomorrow's storm. Perhaps it was the voice of a parent, speaking softly across the veil of death. In dreams, people received what waking society couldn't always offer: solace, warning, mystery, direction. A conversation with the unknown. And maybe, that's what we've truly lost. Not the dreams, but the humility to listen. Across continents and centuries, one belief stayed the same. Dreams aren't random. They are doors. And the real question isn't whether dreams are real. It's whether we're brave enough to walk through them. Carved into temple walls. Hidden in clay tablets. Whispered by priests, poets, and prophets, there is always the same invitation. Pay attention. Close your eyes not to escape the world, but to see it more clearly. Because in that quiet hour, when the world goes still, when the heartbeat of the day finally fades, we might hear what the Sumerians, Egyptians, and Greeks already knew: that dreams are not the flickers of a tired mind. They are the voice of something deeper. They are not echoes. They are the soul speaking. In its oldest and most sacred language,